folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin. Eclectic album reviews and general musical meanderings. For the next 6 weeks or so, I'm going to be listening to a bunch of new music because it's 2023, and I want to make sure that 2023 sounds different than 2022. So a lot of these albums I'm listening to are going to kind of be superficial listens, but they're going to play a big role in the coming months to set the stage for what's going to be happening for the rest of the year. So it's a pretty exciting period of listening for me. But let's go and get started. The first one I've got is The Smiles, A Light for Attracting Attention. This is a Radiohead side project that includes Tom York, lead singer, and Johnny Greenwood, the guitar player, and then Sons of Kemet drummer Tom Skinner. Radiohead's future is always sort of mysterious right now. Tom York is very oblique about talking about what's going to be going on with the band in the near future. But in 2020, he and Johnny Greenwood had gotten together and were starting to play off of some riffs off of each other and doing some writing. And because it was locked down and there was other members of Radiohead that were sort of locked into other projects, they decided rather than hold on to this material they were working on, they were just going to kind of move forward and put it out there as this side project, what ended up being The Smile. This isn't really necessarily a new direction for Tom York and Johnny Greenwood. It really does feel mostly like a Radiohead album. I really feel like the name change is due to the fact that Radiohead at large, the whole band, wasn't involved in it. A few distinguishing factors I think you could point out for A Light for Attracting Attention that maybe distinguishes it from other Radiohead stuff. It feels a little bit more about rhythm and texture than it is about melodic songwriting, although those components are there. And when I say this doesn't really feel like a new direction, that's not really a criticism. I really think that A Light for Attracting Attention is pretty comparable to most of Radiohead's more recent stuff. Certainly it kind of makes sense as a next step after A Moon-Shaped Pool, which I think is a real late period favorite in Radiohead's catalog. Next up I got Brendan Eder's Therapy. Brendan Eder, a couple of years ago, played a really, really big role in my top 20 with his album To Mix With Time. And I really loved kind of the funky, energetic qualities of that album. But on that album, there was a track on there that was a cover of an Aphex Twin ambient song, number 20 from Lichen, I believe is how you pronounce that one. Therapy uses that track as a launching pad for an album's worth of really glacially paced ambient style music. More along the lines of the kind of contemporary woodwind ensemble approach that he was taking on To Mix With Time, more so than he did on Cape Cod Cottage, is a little bit more of a jazz-influenced album. And like To Mix With Time, his arrangements are brilliant, and most importantly, his use of woodwinds and particularly double reeds with bassoon is just phenomenal. Brendan Eder's albums, from my experience with him so far, all have taken these very distinctive turns, very conceptually based turns. And I really love that about his work because he clearly follows what inspires him. It is a perfect album for walking outside in the snow. It has a very peaceful, placid sense to it, but it still is one of those albums that's soothing but not boring. It's got amazing melodicism that he retains even from his more energetic work. It's just shown here at a different pace. Next up I got Clippings, Visions of Bodies Being Burned. This album is apparently the second part of a triptych of albums in which Daveed Diggs is delving pretty deeply in his sort of horrorcore concept of rap. And I even hesitate to really classify this as a rap album because Clipping just does stuff different. The instrumental aspects of what they do have more in common, I think, with like Music Concrete than it really does with your average rap album. I mean, there's lots of sounds being involved there, definitely make beats out of them, but really they're almost like sound experiments with hip-hop stylings over
the head, but they try to make sense of start they six. Let them know that they're levitating just ahead and they best not slip. Just because you bled out doesn't mean you ever left, and that's that shit. They be running scared and they're telling all their secrets. Don't that sound like snitch behavior, snitch behavior? Zip it up, kiss the fear and simply savor. Lick it up, that tastes like wishes made by twisted prayers. Rip it up, split the vision, lynch the savior. Get the guts, then you will grab one right by the dream space. Make one scream until she pray. Make one run until he...
And like on their first album, Clipping, which is a real favorite of mine from a couple of years ago, what they're really laying down as far as the pads go isn't particularly funky. The rhythms aren't super complicated. Most of the funk, most of the groove that you're hearing from these songs are coming from Daveed Diggs's really intense vocal performance. He digs in really, really deep into the groove and does things that are super rhythmically informed, and does it with almost impeccable diction. So you can hear all the words that he's saying, even though he's rapid fire with his lyrics. Most of the groove that you're feeling is coming from just him digging in with the inflection of his voice and his rhythmic approach. But in addition to his vocal performances, the album just drips with menace because of the textures that they use to back him up. And finally, for this post, I got HHY and the Kampala Unit's Lithium Blast. HHY and the Kampala Unit is a Ugandan experimental electronic group. This is the best way that I can describe what they do. Comprised of 3 people, a trumpet player, a percussionist, and a guy that kind of does DJ/production work. I think that the lines between those two things are getting blurrier all the time. And kind of what I saw a couple of years ago when I was listening to Chukbo and the Angstrummers, the way that they manipulated sound on stage with the drums, this guy does the same thing. Except a lot of the work that he does is manipulating the sounds of the trumpet player and to a degree the percussionist as well. And despite describing it as an electronic album, it's wonderfully organic in the way that it's played and performed. You can tell that the guy that's doing the percussion work, even though he's playing this sort of electronic drum pad setup, has its background in traditional African drumming, to my ears, because the polyrhythms you hear in this album, the polyrhythms are everywhere, are not metric, they're relational. So in some ways it feels a little bit disorienting to Western ears because he's not thinking about dividing things up, he's thinking about fitting things together, and that's a really big difference in the way African rhythms work in comparison to more Western style rhythms. I'm always fascinated by African experimentalism in contemporary settings, especially when we start getting into electronica. And Lithium Blast is one of the best examples of this I've heard in a super long time. In some ways, to Western ears, it's going to be a little bit disorienting, in the same way that whenever you listen to African traditional music, it's disorienting because there's so much emphasis on rhythms, and the rhythms are so disorienting, it's kind of hard to latch onto. And along with all those complicated polyrhythms going on, percussion work, is super ominous pads of synthesizer sounds, and the way that he's pulling extra octaves and harmonizations out of that trumpet just really makes this sound like it's a lot bigger project than it is, and one that probably feels like it's mostly done in the studio, but I suspect from what I've seen, from the little videos that I've seen of these guys playing live, they can do it live too, and I think that's super cool. So that's all I got for this particular roundup. Now, I did have a question that came up. Somebody asked me about how do I find all this music. So I'll tell you that for me personally, I'm a really, really big fan of Bandcamp. As a matter of fact, I'm very, very in touch with my Bandcamp wish list. It's got like 300 albums on it right now. But I'm always listening to stuff off it, little chunks, little previews for that, and always pulling things off as I kind of find them interesting or they fit into ways of listening that I'm looking into right now. I have things that have been on there for a couple of years, and I've had things on there that are a couple of weeks old. And I'm always putting things on. I'm always taking things off. I also have a shorter list over on Amazon of things you can't get on Bandcamp, and I also pull things off of Pitchfork and Dutch Progressive Rock pages are my other two big places I look. But especially this time of the year, I'm looking at year-end lists from 2022, and especially the top 5 of any year-end list. I'm going to look at those albums really, really carefully and see if I can pull things off for that. And of course, that always puts me a little bit behind the curve for the next year. But I don't care. It's new music to me, you know? And so by the end of the year, of course, my goal is to provide you guys with the best music I could find. So I'm less concerned about being on the cutting edge of what people are listening to right now and delivering stuff that I think is really pretty good and stands up to scrutinized listening. So I have more videos about this coming up. There's going to be quite a few more in the next few weeks. So if you want to know when those are going to happen, please like and subscribe and share this video out with your friends. Follow me over on Spotify. I'm starting a new list for 2023. I've also started a Patreon page. So if you're interested in finding out ways that you can support and contribute to the vlog, please go over there and check that out. Until you see you next time, I'll catch you guys on the flip side.